and it appears we are live.
All right. Forgive me, my recollection. Am I chair of the governance committee now?
You know, what's interesting is I don't know that we currently have a chair of the governance committee. So Liz, if you would like to appoint one on the fly, or if you would like to run us through this.
I'll appoint Darius to keep running with it. He's got the flow this afternoon, if that works.
That's fine. Well, as the temporary chair of the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency Governance Committee, I call this meeting to order at 12:36. All members of the committee and the board as a whole are here. The first item of the agenda is I'd ask for motion to waive the reading and to approve the minutes as presented in the materials. Motion. Someone raise their hand.
Motion.
Joe and Liz, maybe. Any discussion, any changes, any issues? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
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 All right, so next we have our remote access policy, which Sarah referenced briefly in the last meeting in the finance committee. Take us through that, or?
Yeah, sure. I can kick things off and then maybe turn things to Joe and to Sarah. So as mentioned previously, open meetings law was modified as part of the April legislation that was passed. It allows for basically, it requires in-person meetings, but allows for members above and beyond quorum to participate remotely, provided that certain things are in place. One of those things is a agency meeting policy. And so included in the packets is an agency meeting policy. And that describes this in more detail. What I'll note is that when members are joining remotely, again, it's above and beyond the number required for quorum. There's certain extraordinary circumstances which are described in the policy, which also mirror language that's from the Committee on Open Government for describing, what those circumstances are. That could include a disability, an illness, a death of an immediate family member, and the items are listed there. When it's determined that a board member is joining remotely, we have to update the notice to include basically the live stream link for the IDA. And for the minutes, when we record the minutes, we will note that members have joined remotely. And with that, maybe I'm just going to turn things over to Joe just to cover anything I've maybe left out.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I think, frankly, that's a very good summary. It really is an attempt to address some of the benefits of having, remote access, if you will, by way of the holding of governmental meetings. But at the same time, when you actually read the statute carefully and the policy carefully, there is still this significant stress or focus on people, namely the governmental entity members, attending meetings in person and being available and frankly accountable for the decisions and the votes that they're making. So the attempt of this policy is to provide flexibility in cases where, as Tom described them as extraordinary, where a member can't be available and still wants to attend the meeting for quorum purposes and voting purposes. But when you look at the policy carefully, we still need to have a quorum present in order to be able to move forward. It also, frankly, provides for additional access to the public, which, given the increased use of technology, I think is a good thing in terms of transparency and openness. So again, the idea here is to provide some flexibility and options for the board We've tried to minimize the obligations on the board. We've had discussions with Tom and Sarah about potential administrative issues, and we've tried to minimize them, and we'll continue to look at them for purposes of minimizing of administrative burden. But with that, I'll open it up for comments or questions.
Could I just add a couple of pieces in here? I'd want to note, and thank you, Joe, to both you and Shannon for putting this together. The policy that you have in front of you is looking like it'll be a pretty standard document that you'll see across multiple industrial development agencies, certainly the ones represented by Hudson Russ across the state. We'll see this language there. It also has been modeled directly after the legislation that was approved. And so much of the language that you see in here, the provisions come directly out of what was approved by New York State. In regards to some of the administrative and operational challenges that this provides, I do want to underscore a couple of different things for the committee as you're considering the policy in front of you. As Tom and Joe mentioned, we do still need at every meeting to have quorum present in person at 21 Lodge Street from tomorrow going forward for all of our committee and board meetings, regardless of whether we approve this policy or not. That means that 4 board members do need to be in attendance at 21 Lodge Street for every meeting. We currently only have 5 members seated on this body. And so there are some definitely potential conflicts on how who gets to sort of use the, in case of emergency, break glass remote Zoom in. So I do want to make sure that the board is aware that really the intent, when you sort of look at the spirit of the legislation that was passed, it's that public meetings are held in person unless there's an emergency that precludes a member from being there. So I would ask that as you're really considering whether or not you can attend a meeting, also just being conscientious that that there are other members that may also have emergencies that preclude them. So use it judiciously. You can also see in section 4B, there is a notification that if you are looking to attend remotely, that you would need to let Liz and I both know that. I think we'd ask that you try to do that 24 hours in advance. Obviously, if someone falls ill or if there is something that is indeed unexpected day of, that will certainly happen from time to time, but please make your best efforts to let us know at least 24 hours in advance so that we can go through all those logistics that Tom walked through, but also ensure that we can get the other members here in person. It also allows Liz and I to ask for documentation. You are all volunteers on this body. I think the hope is to not have to get a doctor's note from everybody every time. So that goes back to, again, please use this judiciously so that we don't have, many scenarios of competing emergencies where we have to sort of make a judgment call as to whether to allow for virtual attendance or if we're going to need to scrap a meeting entirely because of the inability to get quorum in the room. So I just wanted to sort of poke at a couple of those pieces as we're considering this legislation. As Tom mentioned, this is a great tool to have to allow for that flexibility, particularly as quarantining requirements still exist, particularly as life around volunteering for the Industrial Development Agency Board still exists. But just some logistics quirks to think through as you're considering the policy.
If I could just add to that, Sarah, the legislation that was passed does have a provision that requires the public to be able to view the meetings. For the IDA, we've been live streaming since the beginning of 2020, so there's really, from a operational perspective of that, there's no change for the IDA. That's a little bit different for the CRC, and we can get into that at the CRC meeting. But and again, if there are questions for council, I believe that can be done in an exempt session if we're seeking advice of council.
It seems to me that having that duly noted excuse would maintain the ability to vote remotely in a meeting. But if we are not if we don't have a good enough excuse, there's nothing that prevents us from attending the meeting anyway, remotely. Is that correct?
Well, currently our meetings are live streamed to YouTube, so you would be able to join the YouTube link and watch. We could probably also provide the Zoom link if you were not an excused member. Again, this is challenging because we're so short on board members currently. But when we're back at full steam, if we do have quorum in place and we have multiple members, if it isn't sort of an excused absence, there is the possibility to do either of those things, but you wouldn't count toward quorum, and you wouldn't be able to vote on any of the decisions in front of the body.
Okay. Any other questions for anybody?
I would note too, we will have to have the ability for the public to comment on this should this move out of committee today. So we would do that, assuming a positive recommendation out of committee, we would do that ahead of or during the board meeting next week.
Is it just at the meeting, or do we have to have a separate public hearing for
Just
comment?
open it up for public comment at the meeting. It's fine.
All right. So is there a motion on the table to move this new policy to the floor for an approval of the whole board?
So moved.
All right, Lee, second.
Second.
Joe? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, on to TEFRA approval fee policy, which is in page
Page 9 of the
9. Yep,
the PDF.
materials.
This is a sort of a more of an administrative action. We are updating the agency administrative and other fees, or proposing to update the agency administrative and other fees policy to include TEFRA approval fees. These are basically instances where we are just being asked to hold a TEFRA hearing in accordance with, I believe it's section 147F of the IRS code. The most recent example of this was at the CRC, where we had St. Peter's coming in for such a request. And so, based on precedent, we were suggesting that this is a quarter of a point of the aggregate principal amount. And I will note most of these requests will more than likely come from CRC, but we are just updating the IDA's policy just in case.
Yeah, have we ever had in the recent past, a bond vote at the IDA? I don't think no.
It's been some time, Darius, correct?
Yeah, okay. All right, any questions, any comments?
Just to underscore what Tom said, this is a situation that is more common with the CRC, but we thought since we were amending the CRC policy, we would do a similar policy change for the IDA in the event that we got one of these situations for the IDA. And speaking generally, it's good to have a policy for things so that you have some guidance when you get a request. And so this is the reason that we're following up on this change in our policies.
Great. Well, then I would ask for a motion to amend our policy to reflect the TEFRA fees, the administrative and other fees, part 21 of our policies. I call for a motion to approve that and send it to the full board floor for a vote, a positive recommendation.
Motion to amend the rules.
All right, Joe, second.
I'll second.
Liz, all right, terrific. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, next order of business. Governance Committee Charter. In your materials, we have to review the adequacy of our Governance Committee Charter, the same way we reviewed the adequacy of our Finance Committee Charter. I have reviewed it and find ourselves, again, to be entirely adequate. I don't believe the staff is recommending any changes.
Correct.
So again, I don't know if there's any issues or questions or any more comments that people want to bring up. I'm not sure if staff wants to talk about anything in this.
Nothing of note.
If not, then let the record reflect we have reviewed the adequacy of our charter and find ourselves to be entirely adequate for posterity's sake. All right, call for applications. We are a couple board members down. The Common Council has not yet put out the call for applications as they are the appointing entity, but hopefully they will soon. Do I need to talk to anybody? Do I need to,
no, I
talk to anybody?
I think it is on their agenda to get out. I will note in your recently reviewed governance charter, you will have seen the clause that requires the governance committee to develop the competencies and personal attributes required of directors and assist those authorized to appoint members to the board in identifying qualified individuals. So as part of that, and you guys are old hat at this point because it feels like we've been doing it quite a bit recently, the governance committee has had the chair compose a letter on behalf of the agency to the Common Council outlining some of the requirements and suggested qualities of prospective board members. We thought because we were having the governance committee meeting today that we'd get a little bit of a jump on that despite the call not being out yet. Typically we do this right in advance of them performing their interviews with selected applicants. So what we've included in your packet today was the most recent letter that the agency had drafted for the council. That was back in at the end of September of last year. It does walk through a number of bullet points related to identified areas that the board would like to see experience or perspective. And so hopefully today we'd be able to have a discussion on any updates that you would like made to this. We've talked about it with Liz as well for any of her thoughts on this to be able to get it over to the council as soon as possible.
I find it to be rather full, complete, and a good template for what they should be looking for.
Yes,
I have
Sarah.
I have to agree with Darius. I remember when we reviewed this and I think we went over this letter pretty good, so.
Yeah, I think it's sufficient. I think we're good for what we need.
Liz, I didn't mean to cut you off earlier. I'm sorry.
I did too. I apologize.
That's what I was gonna say. I read it more in depth after I first met with Sarah and Tom, and it covers everything. I'm good with it.
All right.
I'll note too, and something Liz had brought up as we were talking through, since this letter had been drafted, the two members that we have had resign are Susan Petto and Bob Schofield. And so, looking at the geography of where they had lived, both that as well as their professional experience and background, Bob with his legal expertise and Susan in economic development and business consulting. Those are two areas that we've lost since this letter had been written. They are reflected already in the bullets. So I think staff is comfortable with this as well, and we can work, Liz, we can work together to just update the language a little bit and get it executed and sent over.
Okay.
All right. Thanks very much. Next, compliance update. Annual board compliance document summary.
So this is very brief. Just want to loop back on all of the compliance documents as it relates to financial disclosures. We did submit those. We received them from all the board members, and we did submit them to the city. So we are in compliance. In addition, all of the annual surveys were submitted as part of the Paris report. So those are also submitted. So we're in compliance on that. And as it relates to ABO board member training status, we are in compliance. We do have Joe and Liz are in their first year here on the board. By the end of this calendar year, we will have training. Liz, we are just confirming with the ABO when the last training was, and I believe it's the best practice is every 3 years is to go through the training. But we will loop back on that, and but we are in compliance.
All right. Anything else? We're compliant, we're adequate. We've made our motions. So I guess I would call for a motion to adjourn. Liz, all right,
Second.
all those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Next,